You're all seated and ready to go, so let's go ahead and start a couple of minutes early. It's good to see you all. Good to be back. Appreciate the freedom to be up with my mom for a while and to see a lot of preachers I haven't seen in a long time at a get-together they had at the School of Good Works up there. They had a number of older preachers speaking, so it was very helpful. Got to visit a little congregation in Sydney, New York on Sunday, and this congregation we've been worshiping with for years. I think the first time I met them was 1988, so fellow's pretty well given his life to being up there, and is suffering from dementia now and is stepping back from preaching and looking for someone else to go up there, and it's really difficult. The area has deteriorated, kind of fallen apart. A lot of places in upstate New York are struggling economically, so you just wonder who will take up the mantle, something like that. But got to be with my mom. She's 85. She's doing very, very well, so we're thankful for that, thankful for times to be with her. So back to the Psalter tonight after singing last Wednesday. A few slides just to review what we've covered in the previous two classes. We've talked about last time genre, and when we use that, we're talking about a classification, a way to sort psalms into types. And so we did that, and we came up with these arbitrary classifications, these arbitrary genres. And we talked a little bit about each type and what it was, and we also gave examples of each and read from those examples. So now we're aware that Psalms can do a lot of different things. And well, you think about it, songs that we find on the radio say a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. Anybody still uses a radio? It's so funny. We still have AM radios, but do we ever use an AM radio anymore? We still have it. But, the music, it says a lot of different things, a lot of different ways. And here it is with the Psalms. So the question that follows, I think, from that is, okay, if we know that there are all of these different types, why didn't they arrange them in some sort of order? So you could go to them and say, okay, this is where the hymns are, and these will be the laments, and these will be the Thanksgiving Psalms. And it just defies arrangement like that. And you go, well, why in the world did they do that? Well, the next question that kind of comes from that, why didn't they put them in better order, is how did they collect them in the first place? How did they assemble them? How did they arrange them initially? And that kind of begs the question, well, who wrote them? And so we're going to dig into those questions a little bit tonight and try to understand that a little bit better, try to put a handle on that. We've already mentioned Psalm 90. And this is a psalm underneath the number, the title of the psalm. The title says, A Prayer of Moses, the Man of God. And so, if this is so, goes all the way back to the hand of Moses. And that makes this a very, very old psalm. Let's take the time to read this. It's a very profitable psalm. Psalm 90, verses 1 through 17. Lord, you've been our dwelling place in all generations, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, Return, O children of man, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They're like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes, it is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So the oldest psalm then, a psalm of Moses, a song of Moses, a prayer of Moses. And you can maybe in your mind fix a date, BC, that Moses might have written that. We'll come back to that in a minute. But Moses, of course, wasn't the only writer of the Psalms. And you can go through, not all Psalms tell you who the author is. There are a number of them that just dive into what they're going to say after the number. And we don't really know who wrote them, but some of them do. And so we can compile a list. Besides Moses with Psalm 90, we see that David, almost too many to count, at least half of the 150 are attributed to his hand. But then we have Solomon with 2 of the Psalms, even though one of them kind of looks like David wrote it. Asaph, a number of them. Heman, the Ezrahite, and Ethan, the Ezrahite, each have 1, and they're right together, 88 and 89. Jeduthun, 3. And then the sons of Korah have quite a few as well. So we have these different authors. And if you know that they're written by these different people and you have other accounts of those people in the Bible, you can start to build a range of years over which these were written. We know from Moses to David was 300 years, something like that. So we've got a spread already that's pretty significant.
You also have some, I don't know how many that are anonymous.
That's right.
I just noticed that Psalm 91 is anonymous.
That's right.
Anonymous
Quite a few. Quite a few. We have already talked about when Psalm 90 was written. When do you think this psalm was written? I know I didn't assign this to you already, but listen to how it starts. A song of ascents, this is 126, when the Lord brought back the captive ones of Zion. Okay, back from captivity. When did that happen? They went off to captivity in 586 and came back in like 526. So maybe just say around 500 or so, this would have been written. So that is almost 1,000 years after Moses wrote his psalm. And so that's where we get this spread of nearly 1,000 years that these songs just got collected somehow. As far as we can tell, and a lot of this we're just kind of trying to be detectives and figure it out, these psalms could have come from specific trials that the author experienced. They went through something, and as a result of that came this song or this prayer. But what you'll notice is, to make the Psalms more useful, they'll be written with just a general kind of a reference to what happened. For instance, look at this one. Psalm 51. If you go to Psalm 51 and look at the title, what does it say? Psalm 51.
David plead for mercy, forgiveness, and cleansing.
After? Okay.
After he's gone into Bathsheba.
Some of them say after he's gone into Bathsheba. Okay? So he's committed a number of sins as a result of that. Well, at this point, he'd already sinned with Bathsheba and then had Uriah the Hittite killed. He's done all of those. But when he writes the psalm, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. And he stops there, because if he had gone on and said, cleanse me from my sin of adultery, well, that wouldn't be of a lot of practical use to someone who hadn't done that same sin. And if he said, cleanse me from the sin of murder, well, that wouldn't necessarily apply to someone who had not committed murder. But if he just stops and says, cleanse me from my sin, well, now that applies to everybody. We can all use that one then. And so the specifics of the occasion that caused the psalm to be written may be purposefully concealed so that it'll be more general and more useful to us. So that's kind of a principle that's going on. So if the writer purposefully takes away the specifics, it makes it that much harder for us to try to figure out exactly when it was written. The book of Psalms is arranged into 5 books, sub-books. And so here in this table, you can, I think I showed it to you once before, but book 1 goes from chapter 1 through chapter 41. So 41 chapters in the first book. The second book, and so forth. You can see how that goes on. So books 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It must not have always been laid out that way. Because look at what it says here in Psalm 72 and verse 20. Psalm 72, verse 20. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. Okay. But there are a lot of prayers of David, the son of Jesse, after that. So at some point, they kind of buttoned it up, and it's maybe like the book of John, where at the close of chapter 20, it's like, okay, there you go. Okay, but I'll add chapter 21, because it fits. You really need to have that too. So it's like he started to end the thing, and then finally rearranged them differently. And so there's some of that going on. This is kind of a false end in Psalm 72 and verse 20. To the arrangement. Now, in the, I think it was 1980s, a fella, I don't remember his name, but he, through his analysis, came up with an amazing meaning of the arrangement of the Psalms, and he said it all had to do with the seam Psalms. And the seam Psalms are the ones at the beginning and end of each sub-book. So if you look at Psalm 1 and Psalm 41, it kind of gives you, the first and the last, it gives you the flavor for the first book. And then look at 42 and 72, and that'll tell you about the next book. 73 and 89 tells you about the third. 90 and 106 tells you about the fourth. 107 and 150 tell you about the fifth book. And he went through and he explained about how it's about praising God and honoring God and looking forward to the Messiah. And from his analysis, he came up with this interesting structure. A lot of folks kind of scratch their head and go, yeah, no, it's not really in there. You're imposing that. It'd be nice if it worked out that way, but you're kind of imposing on the Bible a structure that it doesn't have, and that doesn't really work. So you go, okay. We like to do that, if we think we're academics, we like to come up with something new, some way to analyze something in a structure, and a lot of times it's not there and you can't impose it. It wouldn't be doing it justice. But there is something that does seem to hold true. A way to look at these books that is valid and seems to work a little better is to look at the first couple of Psalms and look at the last few Psalms. Look at Psalm 1 and Psalm 2. Look at Psalm 145, 146, 147, 148, 149, and 50. And you can really get the sense that there's a beginning and there's an end. And what you see, I think, as you work through is that the initial section, book 1, is pretty heavy on laments and, oh, woe is me, and they're after me, and I need some help here. That kind of thing is pretty heavy, not exclusively in book 1, but it's heavy in book 1. And as you work through to the last book, book 5, you'll see that's really heavy in hymns, praising God and saying how wonderful he is. And so a lot of the psalms that are laments will start you in a place where you're crying and bring you along to where you're rejoicing and confident. A lot of individual psalms do that. And so you can also say in general, the book of Psalms is doing that. It's finding you in the beginning with a lot of laments, and it's bringing you to a place where you're praising God and you're confident and you're rejoicing. So that kind of structure, I think, works, and that kind of analysis works. All right, a lot of talking by me so far. Mark.
So when you think about, and I think you've alluded to this, but when you think about what appears to be the purpose of the Psalms, it appears to be the psalter, the songbook, as it were, of God's people in ancient times.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you think about, well, how does that work? Well, one of the ways that it works is you're limited because they generally wrote on scrolls, and you can only get so much information on a scroll. And so it's just like we have, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Some of the books that we have in our Bibles are broken up because apparently they were broken up that way on scrolls. You had 2 scrolls for Kings and 2 scrolls for Chronicles and so on. And so you may be having some of that here, but also, so you think about the use of them. So apparently they sang these psalms in worship. So you're limited by how many you can get on a scroll. And then, so you made the point earlier, you said it seems like they're kind of mixed up here. Well, if you think about our songbooks, yeah, it's organized, but it's also mixed up in the sense that you've got a lot of different kinds of songs. So maybe you don't want all laments in Songbook 1, and you don't want all hymns in Songbook 2, and that kind of, you don't want, that kind of thing. So maybe they kind of just had a mixture, so that if you've got scroll 1, you can sing a couple of hymns, and then sing a lament, and then, sing another hymn to close, or something like that.
Yeah, that might work. And it'd be interesting to see, just going through, I haven't done this yet, just classify each psalm by type, going through 1 through 150, and see how they flow, see how they repeat, what kind of order there might be. I'm sure somebody's done that. I haven't done
Well, if book 5 is all imprecatory psalms, that would be bad. So unless you're just going to sing, today we're only going to sing imprecatory psalms.
Yeah.
You need to have, just like in our songbooks, you need to have some kind of a mixture. You don't want to have all communion songs or all invitation songs or all hymns or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing about the book, in my Bible, it has a
Yeah, tables like that are just so helpful because it isn't in a simple order. You need an index, really, some sort of an index to get you to the right place. Unless you want to just start flipping through, and that's going to take you a while because there are 150 chapters. So I enjoy those tools that send you to the right one that you're looking for. These titles, Sing for Joy in the Lord, O you righteous ones, praise is becoming to the upright. This is Psalm 33. I think we've looked at this before. I think last time we looked at this one. And so here's a upbeat and full of praise psalm. The next one that I've got up here, Psalm 3, I don't think we've looked at that before. This has a historical title on it. And this is a title that gives you an idea of the circumstance when this was written. And it says, this is David, a psalm of David, when he fled from Absalom, his son. Of course, now that is a terrible situation. He's afraid that his son is going to kill him and take over the kingdom. So he's in a very low point there. Doesn't know what's going to happen. So very, very different places from which these come, but I guess the point for this psalm, or this slide, is to show you that some slides, like the one on the right, like Psalm 3, have a historical title. And we take those with a grain of salt, because we don't think they're all written by the fellow that wrote the psalm. We think somebody added that later as a help. And sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. Consider this one, Psalm 18. This has a historical title here in yellow. Psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who spoke to the Lord the words of this song in the day that the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. And so I believe Psalm 18 is the psalm that also appears in 2 Samuel 22. You can go to 2 Samuel 22 and find this almost verbatim. And then we know the instance, the circumstance from which this one came. So historical titles. How many are there? Only 14 psalms have historical titles. And of these 14, all of them pertain to the life of David. All of them pertain to the life of David. And they'll start off by saying where in the life of David this occurred. And you can go back in 13 out of the 14, you can go and find the scripture reference of that, and you can see where that was. Some historical titles work better than others. 51 we just looked at, 3 and 30, those all work pretty well. But there are some historical titles that are a little bit problematic. Some of them just don't work that well. One of them that doesn't work that well is, and you see if you can come up with what's wrong with this one. Psalm 30. Psalm 30. What does that say? What was the circumstance?
Psalm of the dedication of the house of David.
Does it say that the house of David in yours? In mine it says a song at the dedication of the temple. Was David around when they dedicated the temple? No, he was long gone. That was Solomon who built the temple after he was gone. So, okay, was it at the house of David, or was it and translators have different takes on that. So, yeah, look at those historical titles when they're given 14 different times, but go, all right, well, maybe that was just somebody adding that to try to be helpful. So, from the time of Psalm 90 to the return of the remnant in Psalm 126, a span of about 1,000 different years, 1,000 years. It's just amazing to think of this being collected over that time. Exactly how they did it, I'm not too sure. Okay, here's a psalm. Let's look at this one. Psalm 5. Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my groaning. Give attention to the sound of my cry, my King and my God, for to you I do pray. O Lord, in the morning you hear my voice. In the morning I prepare a sacrifice for you and watch. For you're not a God who delights in wickedness. Evil may not dwell with you. The boastful shall not stand before your eyes. You hate all evildoers. You destroy those who speak lies. The Lord abhors the bloodthirsty and deceitful man. But I, through the abundance of your steadfast love, will enter your house. I will bow down toward your holy temple in the fear of you. Lead me, O Lord, in your righteousness. Because of my enemies, make your way straight before me. For there's no truth in their mouth. Their inmost self is destruction. Their throat is an open grave. They flatter with their tongue. Make them bear their guilt, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Because of the abundance of their transgressions, cast them out. For they have rebelled against you. But let all who take refuge in you rejoice. Let them ever sing for joy, and spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may exult in you. For you bless the righteous, O Lord. You cover him with favor as with a shield. We don't really see a specific circumstance that would have given rise to this, but it does sound in verse 3 like this is a psalm, a good psalm to start the day with. This is a morning psalm, or at least he's referring to, in the morning I will pray to you. And so if you need a psalm to start a day, I just recommend number 5. Seems like it's a good one for that. Especially, this seems like it's a pretty good one if you've got somebody after you. Somebody after you and telling lies and saying some terrible things. So in the morning, if you've got somebody after you, this is a psalm that you can use. It's a psalm of, there's a little bit of lament about how bad the enemies are, but there's some confidence in there too in verse 7, isn't there? I, through the abundance of your steadfast love, will enter your house. I'm going to overcome through you. You're going to help me do this, and I'm going to be okay. In verse 12, you bless the righteous, O Lord. You cover him with favor as with a shield. So, in the morning, when enemies are after you, that might be a good indication of when you use Psalm number 5. Psalm number 63. Let's go to that. Who was the girl that we used to help get down from Shenandoah College? Was Maddie? Was it Maddie? Yeah. Maddie, yeah. This was her favorite song. She told me this was her favorite, 63. Yours too? Very good. So let's go through this, 63. And this is one of those with a historical title, 63. It says this is about David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. Now, a couple of times that David found himself in the wilderness, so you kind of have to guess a little bit where exactly in his life this was. But first time is when he's on the run from Saul. And he was on the run from Saul for quite a few chapters in 1 Samuel. So this is probably in this time. Remember, through his victory over Goliath, he was promised to be a prince, and his family wouldn't have to pay any taxes, and he was just, to be exalted. He's been also at that time anointed as the next king of Israel, but he's on the run. And it's just the opposite of what it should be if we were thinking about it. He should have been already installed, get Saul out of the way. But no, Saul's still there, and he's making trouble for him. So, Psalm 63, verse 1. O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there's no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory, because your steadfast love is better than life. My lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips when I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. But those who seek to destroy my life shall go down into the depths of the earth. They shall be given over to the power of the sword. They shall be a portion for jackals. But the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by him shall exult, for the mouths of liars will be stopped. We have a song that's based on this one in our songbook, right? Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever trust you. Do you remember that one? I think it might be, I don't know if it's in our current one. It's a newer kind of a song that you hear the younger people sing. I'm really getting old now if I say stuff like that, but yeah. My lovely assistant will seek and see if it's in there. Oh God, you are my God. I think it begins that way. No?
Yes, it is.
Oh.
647.
647? Let's look at it real quick. It's not an easy song. It's a little bit harder. Does anybody know 647? A couple folks do. 3, 4. Let's try it. We'll see if you can get it. I'm going to change glasses for this one. So here's a question for you, higher level question for you. Where in our songbook do you find the ones that are actually psalms? 1 through 66 in our songbook are psalms. So here's one that's tied to a psalm, but it's way 647. How can that be? Well, that's because it's kind of used in there, but there'll be other things that, it's not the psalm verbatim, so it's a hymn then. Okay, let's try this. And we might want to just sing the melody through the first time. Do so, O God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. you go back and repeat that again. So back to where I will seek you. So let's try that. Start there. You see on the second line? This is the second time through. I will seek you in the morning, and I will learn to follow your ways, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all my days, and I will follow you all my days, and I will follow you all my days, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all my days. So that one was arranged in 1991 by the two guys that are listed there. So it is a fairly new one. And I don't think it has any mention in the text here of 647 that it came from Psalm 63. But now we see Psalm 63 and you could say, well, that looks like a connection there to me. So that happens every once in a while. If you take just a piece of a psalm and then work it in, that's probably the second classification in our songbook. The psalms come first, then the hymns, got a bit of a text from the Bible in there, and then a spiritual song is just something that, it works, but you might not find any scripture references in there at all. In the Psalm 63, you can see when he's out in the wilderness, from Bethlehem was off to the east. And as you're headed down towards the Jordan, and maybe even on the other side of the Jordan, it starts to get, from my understanding, it's pretty arid out there. And so you could understand how the thirst that you'd have in a place like that would be profound. And when he says, my soul thirsts for you as in a dry, weary land where there's no water. That's a great, vivid picture about how much we should desire that relationship with God. A real great idea in verse 3. God's love for us, and I think maybe being in the right relationship with him is what he's talking about, is better than life. If I have to choose between, life and death, obeying you, disobeying you, I'm going to obey you to the death. Like I often refer to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as they're about to go into the furnace. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not going to disobey God by bowing down to that thing. Just a great way that they approach that. So, in verse 4, I'll bless you as long as I live and lift up, in your name I'll lift up my hands. We don't do that much, but that was a way that they would pray sometimes. In verse 5, I don't know if you think about this, but there's a lot of the Psalms and other places as well that talks about how these spiritual things, God's love, his grace, his mercy, all of that, can actually provide a kind of physical satisfaction. They'll say in some of the Psalms, oh, taste and see how great the Lord is. Well, I can't taste the Lord, but, there's a sense that his goodness is palpable to us, even though it's beyond our senses. And even though there's no physical food that you consume when you're doing God's will, there can be a kind of a satisfaction. That's what Jesus was talking about with the Samaritan woman at the well. I have meat ye know not of. My meat is to do the will of my Father. So that works in a sense. And here it is way back 1,000 years before in Psalm 63, verse 5. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food. That's what God can do for us. Did you ever hear somebody refer to the God hole that's in us? There's a place in us that's empty that needs God there. And if you don't have God there, you'll try to fill that hole up with something else, anything. And when you're thinking about that, go back to the book of Ecclesiastes, where he said, well, I tried to do this. I tried to satisfy my soul with wine and with laughter and with building things and with getting great flocks and having servants and all these different things. And it didn't fulfill. You know, he comes down to the conclusion. Hopefully you've already read Ecclesiastes, so this is not much of a spoiler. But he says at the end, fear God and keep his commandments. That's the whole duty of man. And if you do that, you'll find that satisfaction that's palpable. And it's not intuitive. It's not intuitive that would work. But Jesus said it, I have meat ye know not of. My meat is to do the will of my Father. And so, in verse 6, I'll remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. Just with you all the time, as Psalm 1 talked about. We're going to meditate on these things because you've been my help. And in the shadow of your wings, I will sing for joy. Think about Jesus saying, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how many times did I want to call you to me as a hen calls her chicks and put them under the wings and protect you? So there's that figure that Jesus used, and we're there. We're under the wings. You know, we're protected in the shadow of his wings. And when you get in there, you can just go ahead and sing, and you're protected and you're in good shape. My soul clings to you, and your right hand upholds me. You know, I'm weak. My knees are giving out. Yeah, God's there to bolster us up. But then he refers to the ones who've been giving him a hard time here toward the end. Just a little portion of that. But it also, this is one of those Psalms in verse 11 that mentions a king. And so it could be a kingship psalm, at least it's mentioned there. David, the king, will rejoice in God. And everybody else can have a piece of that. All right, so we're kind of strolling through these Psalms and trying to, get a lot of the approaches to them. We're not going to exhaustively consider every Psalm, but we've considered it just generally how understanding the structure of the Psalms can help us. We've looked now at genre, and we looked a little bit at how they're classified and ordered. I didn't give you anything like Art referred to where it says if you're feeling this, then this is the psalm you want. If you can collect one of those, find one of those are very helpful. But just let me say that the order is not as though we're put in the way you'd order words in a dictionary or topics in an encyclopedia. It's not like that. You got to dig a little bit to find the topic that you want, one that addresses the topic that you want. Okay, so the next class for a week from tonight, I'm going to start talking about the structure a little bit and what exactly did Hebrew poetry look like and how is it arranged. It's different than our poetry. Our poetry, we've got a lot of different types anyway, but theirs is a little different from ours, and so we're going to start to consider that. And it won't be too dry. Don't worry. That's going to be the real dry part. Well, no, we'll try to make it interesting. All right, so appreciate your help tonight. A lot of lecturing from me. Let's go ahead and be dismissed until we get everybody up from downstairs. Oh, everybody's up? Good.